Yeah.
Sir.
Taking them down. Work. Yeah. They did well. And I was all college in the back way. Saturday, you were.
That's a great idea.
You're coming.
I would do it. Huh? So that's a good idea, because I think.
Yeah, you were up having the.
Yard sale.
Down there.
Yeah, same to get some shopping.
Yeah, I heard this, that there's a while down there.
It's all kinds of. Trying to get by the driveway, shoot behind you, but I always get down to them.
Yeah.
I was Stewart. It's kind of like
Yeah. That's it. It's still one of the most. Yeah, in my opinion, so I avoid it. Like I go on down and.
Links up for.
Yeah.
Like it is.
It's.
The never get on that.
You know, Brent. Back there, that's hard.
Yeah. I go up there. Sandwiches.
Looking springs. Looking springs. That doesn't work as well. I come back and.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
There's almost still between Martinsburg and.
Yeah. It's, yeah, and it's like this, and it's narrow, there's just too many blind spots. I just don't like that.
Everybody's there, like, going up there, videotape themselves, like.
Yeah, that's just. He was laughing, remember he laughed?
I hear videotapes.
Yeah.
The evidence of that.
Yeah. I don't know how it is now.
They're 2 years. Initial terms. After 1 year. It's called.
All right, it's June 3rd, 2024, 5:45 PM. We're gonna call this finance committee meeting to order. Present are council members Lang, Koth, Chute, Hauser, and Marmy. First item, the unappropriated balance is sitting at $727,195. And the balance of the budget stabilization fund is at $1,716,018. First item on our agenda is an appropriation, a request for appropriation amount of $50,000.
Good evening. So this is Ohio Department of Development grant money, actually, for the East Side Transmission Line. And this money was originally encumbered for design and construction management purposes. So we're not gonna need all of those funds. We're actually taking $50,000 and encumbering them to, the construction side because we've had a couple change orders out there and it's gonna be more than $50,000, but, this money has already been moved, appropriately by the Department of Development in their grant funding, funds. We just need to do it here so we can reappropriate on our.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $231.46.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is exactly as it says on the $231. It's project's finished and we're transferring the remainder of the money to debt payment account for that project.
Offer motion.
Second.
Motion by Hauser, second by Lang. Questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on full council, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Director. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $10,000.
Yeah, it's $10,000 to put that into my account under service general to hire an outside counsel for some internal discussion.
Motion. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up is soaps.
I will call service committee meeting in order. Those present and myself, Rath, Neely, Claus, Line, and Chu. Up first, ordinance number 24-21. An ordinance approving the amendment of the petition to create the Newark Downtown New Community Authority, determining that the establishment of the Newark Downtown New Community Authority will be conducive to the public safety, convenience, and welfare, and is intended to result in the development of new communities, declaring the new community authority to be organized and body politic and corporate, defining the boundary of the new community district, providing the method of selecting the new community authority board of trustees, fixing the security for those trustees, bonds, according to the initial citizen members and local government representatives to the board of trustees, authorizing related matters in the sheet. Mr. Mauer, that was a mouthful, what did I just say?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the Service Committee. It really boils down to three things. One that you just read, Chairman Rath. The first is we're approving the amended petition that had already gone through. Why is it amended? It's amended because the first time the petition came before you, it only included the piece of land that the city of Newark owned right here at the corner of Fourth and Main, parking right kind of corner to where we are. Since then, Newark Development Partners, was given the authority to also transfer properties to Newark. Those properties are the two properties down on Fourth Street where the parking garage is going to be built. And by the way, those two properties will go through a lot combination, create one lot, the parking garage can be built. Okay. The other piece of property is down a block at the corner of Church and Fourth. There's a parking lot on that corner. That is not in the petition. But that little piece of grass area between the parking lot, north side of the parking lot, is a piece of grass between the parking lot and there's a blue painted front building. That is being brought. So that is why it's being amended. Those three properties are now being brought. Okay, so that's part one of this. Part two is really just the establishment of a new community authority. Brought everything together. We've had resolution of sufficiency. The petition was sufficient to go forward to create the new community authority. So that's the second part. And then the third part really is to provide all the organization that's required to create the NCS. Things like appointing board members, for example. If you had a chance to look at your packet, the last page under, I think that's exhibit E maybe. But it lists the appointed members who will be on the new community authority board. And there are three members that are appointed by the developer. And the developer in this case is the city of Newark. And that's myself, Director Hickman, and Director Rhodes. The three members appointed by the developer in the city. Then there's three appointed members by the council, Newark City Council, and that's Corey Koppelbaum and Dan DeWater. And then the seventh member of the new community authority boards is a government representative, and that appointment is Fred. So that completes the 7-member board of the new community authority. So those are the three main portions of what is contained in this preamble and what is contained in the resolution. Hope I was able to simplify that enough. Certainly welcome any questions and do my best to answer. Cannot. Attorney Rec, who created all the paperwork for us, and he could join me if necessary.
So if, understand a lot of this, because we're acquiring property, we acquire property in the future, we may have to create another.
There's a process, yes, for adding additional properties, and it's all laid out and defined and how that is done, how new community authority can go about the process to add additional properties. Okay.
Mr. Cost.
When I have a citizen ask me why we're doing this, what is the single biggest advantage to doing what we're doing? What is a good answer to that?
New community authorities, John, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so
There's a very broad interpretation. If you wouldn't mind stepping up here.
yes,
Of course, there's a lot of goes into these.
For the record, if you could give us your name and your address, please.
John Bliss, you want the address of the firm Burger Grading, or do you want?
Sure.
Okay, so 100 South Third Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. Burger Grading is the address of that. So the point of new community authorities is a powerful economic development tool. Since you guys in the city have a pre-94 CRA, anyone who contracts into those properties has the right to those exemptions if they qualify for certain improvements. One of the powers of the new community authority is we can do, the property owner will agree to enter into a pre-94 abatement charter. And so that gives a revenue stream in particular for that particular parcel that already has the abatements to help with the economic development tools. As the developer of the city also has the ability to say there's going to be a hotel or a parking garage. We can put different types of sales tax revenue on those different parcels, or just any other different types of by right, there could be a 5% type of levy, I guess, with either special system. In order to spur economic development, to help pay for the parking garage, or to help build roads or bring new residents. So it's just a powerful tool. And as the city, as a developer, you guys are the statutory developers, so you have a unique, you get to direct all these new economic development tools rather than having private development.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Don't be there. Mr. Marmy, in the back, you'll come forward. So you-
Yes. So the way that I see this, exactly what he says, but in my terms that I can understand, is that whenever somebody wants to bring their business into the community in the downtown in this CRA, this new CRA that's being developed, they can get some advantages because they're moving into the CRA. So, or NCA, yeah, sorry, NCA. So and then the city also gets benefits because we can move that money and have different fees and things like that that will stimulate that area even more or provide enhancements to that area. So it's a real win-win situation for the developer and for the city to be able to stimulate economic development, like you said. So and there's no real downfall. It isn't like where the TIFs and things like that where we're dependent upon things. It's things that are set up right up front. And it's really, really beneficial for our economy. And, we can't go back and change the old ones because you can only add to them, every, so many times. And also it can only be so large. So therefore, this takes the place. It's basically what it's doing.
And Mr. Marmy is correct. The NCA can dovetail or work with a CRA. And that's what we're doing actually out of Steve Lehman's over the project. We're using the NCA to redirect CRA tax abatement funds into the NCA back to the developer. So the developer pays the development fees. And that way we didn't have to come before city council to do a TIF to pay for public improvements, roadways, water, sewer, et cetera. And so Marvin was correct. CRA is involved. This downtown area is in a CRA, which allows for up to 100% tax abatements for 15 years on new construction. So I'm glad you're asking questions. This is complicated stuff. And that's why I actually asked the attorney to come and kind of give his overview. But an NCA is not as easy to define as a CRA. CRA is very easy. They abate taxes for X number of years. Run rehabs for new construction. The NCA is a much more powerful tool and that can work in conjunction with and has much broader properties. And it's really a very powerful economic development tool for us and should serve us very well for the downtown area.
Any other questions for the committee? Questions from the audience? I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion to shoot. Seconded by
Be kneeling.
Yeah.
Neely, combined, everybody else. All in favor of passing this on to council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Pass with a vote of 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate your patience, your Japanese. Thank you. That concludes the service committee meeting. For the evening. Next will be the safety committee.
We might need somebody to say what to do.
I'll bring the safety committee to order. Present tonight, Cost, Hauser, Blind, Rath, and Lang for Mr. Reader. The agenda is that we're going to consider ordinance number 24-20, and ordinance amending chapter 850 of the codified ordinances of the city of Newark, Ohio, to impose licensing requirements for adult use marijuana facilities, to limit the number of marijuana dispensaries operating within the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Chair, I can speak on this piece of legislation if that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Right. I know at the last council committee meeting we had regarding economic development, there was discussion around expanding the conditional use areas of zoning. This is kind of another piece to that. I will state that as far as the content of the legislation, which I'll go over a little bit, wasn't intimately involved in the crafting of this. My insistence on this legislation when it came forward to us was that it would limit the number of licenses, because this is a licensing fee, it would limit the number of licenses that would be granted for recreational dispensaries to the 3 medical facilities that currently have those medical licenses. I had made comments at the last council meeting how I thought it was important that we respect the fact that voters in the state of Ohio determined that they wanted to have recreational marijuana in our state. I think that is important to recognize that. I think the other element to this that's important as well is that we need to look after our community in a careful and prudent way. And so as this legislation is being crafted and discussed, my insistence was, again, that 3 license limit be placed in any licensing legislation that was fit for to come forward in front of committee. So that's contained in here. This licensing ordinance has a lot of similarities to our medical licensing. Obviously, that cap is specifically in there. There's also a penalty section that deals with criminal penalties in the licensing for non-compliance with the licensing requirements. There's a $500 license fee, and that's due also upon renewal. There are various clauses in here that maybe people will have questions about. I know the law director and safety director are here as well to talk through that as well. So I guess that's where I'll stop. And of course, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I am of the same mind with Mr. Hauser in that there's a lot of ambiguity as far as where our law enforcement and safety forces are concerned. There's a lot to think about. This is new territory. And I'm also concerned for the community impact as well as how it will affect the review. I was looking at the map and citizens had met with citizens as well last night. They called me out of concern for it. And there is just a lot of ambiguity about this, and they're concerned about their neighborhoods and these establishments having impacted on their neighborhoods, and most are quite content to leave where the establishments are right now. And as far as looking at the map of the state of Ohio, Licking County has 3 establishments already, and most of the state have 2 or less. And so we are far and above most of this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ready? No.
Yeah, I think as far as the licensing goes, I don't see anything ambiguous about it at all. It basically mirrors and reflects the same licensing requirements that we had with medicinal marijuana. We're not necessarily here to regulate medicinal marijuana any more than we are here to regulate recreational use. The main purpose of licensing medicinal use was for us just to gather information for our law enforcement, our safety forces to be able to have information on facilities that have that, and to be able to have consent to search should there arise a need of it. The 3 medicinal marijuana facilities that we have for the law have been very good addition to the city of Newark. As far as limiting the number of dispensaries, you know, when we talked about this with medicinal marijuana, was the one that championed the waiving of the restriction of the number. Because on a fair market, let's I think that if we allow business to function in the city of Newark, I think that the market will dictate the amount of volume that business will do. So I have no problem with limiting the number. That's not our role. It's the state's role, just like it's the state's role to limit the number of liquor permits in a specific area. So that is the state's role. And as far as being specific on the licensing, that is also the state. They are going to dictate what is allowed and what is not allowed within the state, and we're going to dictate how they can apply state along with our own specific requirements within the city of Newark. And then to come out and say that the only people that are allowed to do this are the 3 businesses who currently are doing medicinal marijuana. For what I've heard from many of them, well, if they want to do recreational marijuana, now. But this is absolutely showing favoritism. Absolutely picking winners and losers. This would be no different than if I came out and said, okay, from this day forward, in the city of Newark, if you're going to buy a home, the only place that you can finance that home is Park National Bank. They're the only ones allowed to lend money in the city of Newark. Or if I said, if you got a car, you want to buy car insurance, you have to buy it from State Farm, nobody else. You can't get insurance from anybody else but State Farm. Or if you want to put gas in your car, BP is the only service station that's allowed to service in the city of New York. And I think it's the same thing. It's an extreme example, you know that? I think it's the same thing. And for that reason, I know Lang has crafted the rest of this legislation, so I'd be interested to hear what he has to say. And honestly, I think that we need to eliminate the limits. If we want to impose specific areas, you were talking about, you said you were worried about youth community. We've done that with zoning, and that's not even solid yet. On to the commission, they have the ability to accept it, totally deny it, or make recommendations to change that. I know right now the state is saying that you can't have recreational dispensaries within 1 mile of each other. We do that automatically eliminates one of our 3 medical marijuana dispensaries, because we have 2 that are virtually next door to each other. So we can limit this as much as we want as far as geographic location. That's what we did with the medicinal marijuana dispensaries. We were very, very specific about where we would allow those and where we would not. And that worked well with us. Along with that, there's another provision in this legislation that gives the safety director the ability to decline a license at his discretion. Now, that doesn't give him sole ability, because if he does decline, then they can bring that to council. And council can decide whether to support that decision or not. But that also gives us the ability to further restrict where we want facilities to be. And people say, well, you're going to have one on every street corner, just like the vape shops. That is a ludicrous and ridiculous thing. We can regulate this, we can monitor this, we can control this, we can assure that that is not the case and will not happen. But for us to legislate where 3 specific businesses ventured into this realm of business, and only those 3 businesses alone, nobody else anywhere in the world is allowed to do business in Newark. These 3 businesses do business. And it's not the country.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess first I'll say I'm not sure I understand the need for an emergency clause on this, given that the state hasn't issued final licensing regs yet, or started to issue licenses. We also don't have our zoning finalized. To me, I don't understand why we'd include the emergency clause on this, but as far as the limit goes, I certainly agree with a lot of what Mr. Rath had to say. I think, if, certainly not in favor of, I don't want us to end up with a dispensary on every street corner. I think everybody in the room would agree with that sentiment. But I think there's better ways to do it than to say these specific businesses are going to be given the opportunity, and only these businesses will be given the opportunity to participate in this new market. I think if we are concerned about how many dispensaries we have, I think the way to do it is with our zoning. I think this map that we have sitting here in front of us is a great start. I would welcome any suggestions anyone has as far as, hey, do we not want to put it in all of these zones? The state has in their regs a 1 mile buffer. Now those regs aren't finalized yet, but they have a 1 mile buffer between dispensaries. We could put that into our zoning code. We could be more. We could say 1.5 miles, 2 miles. All of those are other tools we have that have the effect of keeping a limit, but still allowing the free market to operate in a society I would like to keep capitalist. I think this is a very government prescriptive kind of proposal to say, we're gonna pick the 3 winners, and those 3 people forever, because I don't see a time limit on this either, will forever be the only ones that can participate in this market. I probably have more questions, but that's all I have to say.
Okay. I'll make it very clear again. I've said this before. I've always been in total objection to legalizing recreational marijuana in any shape or form. So that puts me in a different area. I certainly want to, in my opinion, I would want to see there be more than 3. The 3 that we've had with medical marijuana sounds as if they've been successful. Sounds like it's been a good thing to happen. When we went through that, I don't think anybody's real sure how that was going to work out either. But I would agree. I don't want to see the vape shops and the whatever you want to call it, those other stores offering recreational marijuana. Does the law director, the safety director, want to weigh in on any of this whatsoever? Or?
I guess there's just a couple things that I wanted to clarify, I think that are kind of misunderstood. First of all, there was a question as to whether or not, we're showing favoritism because we're limiting it to the 3. Well, that's essentially what the state is doing. The state's first rounds of licenses are going to the medical dispensaries. They're not opening any. So we're really not doing anything that the state is not doing.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question right
Yeah.
The regs aren't finalized yet, so we can't say, I mean, the last final regs I saw said that they were giving them more chances, but you could still apply for adult use.
So the medical marijuana applications are coming out June 7th for dispensaries to convert. So they are not subject to the lottery or anything like that. They get
Marijuana or recreational?
medical marijuana dispensaries can apply. The application comes out June 7th. They can apply to convert their license to a dual use. And they will be giving out those licenses by September 7th. So we don't know, I mean, they've given them a deadline to September. Do we know if it's going to happen before then? I don't know. I can't say that, but I do know that the applications do come out June 7th. I can also tell you that our zoning inspector, who I have asked to be here at the next, if this does make it through committee at the next council meeting, is getting calls from our local dispensaries wanting to get ready to distribute adult use. So there is, and him asking for some guidance, and of course we're kind of waiting on this, which is why I think the emergency is so important on this, is because limitations will steer the zoning one way. No limitations, leave it open to wait for zoning and everything like that when we have medical dispensaries dispensaries that are going to be applying for license beginning June 7th. Because there's some things that we need to go through with them to make sure that they are within the zoning regulations as they currently exist. There was something else I wanted to point out.
Specific to what you just said.
Yeah, sure.
I'm totally confused and lost at what you just said.
Okay, what are you confused about?
What you just said. I'd
Okay,
like to be specific.
the fact that,
You said that. I'm not sure what you just said. You said that. We can restrict the zoning, but we need to restrict because zoning is not restricting.
okay, so
Totally lost.
what I'm trying to explain is that you made some statements that were showing favoritism. Well, the state is also showing favoritism in the fact that it's giving licenses first to medical dispensaries already in operation. So that's what the state's doing. And also the fact that it was brought up that it's the state's job to set limits. Well, it is specifically given the city the power to limit or restrict adult use marijuana. So that has been given through the Ohio Revised Code to cities. So they do give us that option. And then what I'm trying to explain is that right now we're in limbo. So the zoning inspector is getting calls from the current medical dispensaries wanting to expand their business. There is some zoning issues that we have to go through with them. But the question is, what is council doing with adult use? So that's why we want to get it through, have council figure out how are we going to address this?
What zoning issues would we have to go through if we've already put in zoning limitations? On medical marijuana, they've applied and have met those standards. I'm gonna imagine that recreational use is going to be very similar.
Okay,
And there is no zoning at all. Recreational use or adult use. So there are no zoning restrictions at all. It's currently.
Right.
Because it's gone through.
so we talked to the zoning inspector about that, and one of his things what the Ohio Revised Code is clear about is that it requires a city to act to restrict or prohibit. So I spoke to him, I know, because we were talking about last time, the zoning, like, well, if adult use is not in the zoning code, then they can't do that, and I don't think that is true after talking to Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter would see them as a retail, and they could go in where retail businesses are allowed, because there's nothing in our zoning code to prohibit, and we haven't acted to prohibit. Which is how vape stores ended up. Right, sure. And, yeah, so that's, he talked about the emergency clause and us wanting to get that through so that we can get some guidance. So some of the boarding zone BZA, things that we have to work through is when all of these dispensaries.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a clarifying question here? My understanding of the licensing is that you have to get a state license. You have to
Are you talking
get
about bars?
the licensing that we're talking about.
Yes.
Is you have to get a state license.
Mhm.
You have to go through the Board of Zoning and get conditional use approved and get the zoning approved. And then you can apply for a license. So we're talking about something that happens after all the zoning, but I'm hearing the emergency is all driven because of zoning.
Well, because George doesn't know if we're going to limit it to 3, if we're gonna open it up.
But that's not a zoning concern.
Well, no,
That'd be a
but
safety
it is.
director, right? The safety director is issuing licenses after zoning is done.
It is.
So it's not
But
George's concern, is it?
we can have, I guess, it depends on when the state's gonna open it up. A lot of things is so great. So if the state opens it up and
But
another.
you're also saying that the state's only opening it up to medical,
Right,
and you want to propose a limit that only allows the medical to apply.
but also our zoning is being opened up further for dispensaries. Would you agree with that? It's being added to some industrial areas that it wasn't in before.
We can it's not fine. I don't know what it's gonna be. 'Cause
Well, I
yes, that's why I'm saying the
I
emergency. clause
understand that, but
makes
the
sense.
legislation that was before the planning commission and will be after tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Opens up the areas more than it was before, because we added them to industrial. Do you agree with that?
No,
Okay, so you say no?
Yeah, absolutely, I say no.
Okay, well, it has been added to some areas.
In our laws,
But not,
Well,
not.
Okay, but my point is that also within our 10B licenses, which will be the next to be issued. And what those would be is that dispensaries who are already in operation may also get an additional license to be at another location. Okay, so in theory, our 3 medical could turn into 6.
Yes,
Do we know that all 3 medical are gonna be permitted?
According to the facts on the Department of Commerce, all medical dispensaries will be given a grandfathered in, and will be given an adult use license. And then they may also apply for another adult use license at a location that is permitted, as long as there's no restrictions or no moratoriums.
yeah. So you're saying that we're opening up more areas, but in order for them to get a license, from up and operate within the city of Newark, they first have to get a license from the state. Then they have to come to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Not unless,
BZA.
not unless their licensing passes and the zoning passes.
Why does it,
Whether the zoning passes or not, it doesn't really matter. But licensing them, they have to go to the BZA.
If our licensing passes, yes, that's correct. That's correct. You're right.
They have to go to the BZA. The BZA has the ability to say no. If the BZA says yes, our safety director still has the ability to say no.
But
And then it comes to council for decision of council. So to say that it's opened up, just because it's not on a green spot on the map, doesn't mean that we're going to permit the facility in that area.
I'm just talking generally that it is, we did add dispensaries to places it wasn't before. I'm just making that comment. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify some things that thought were misunderstood. Obviously, this is a gray area. I mean, we're going into unknown territory. And we're trying to keep up with the state as it's continuing its process. But, you know, I don't think the favoritism argument works because we're doing what the state's doing. And I think that,
So.
Yeah.
Can I comment to that? So we're not doing it with the states, because the state is simply allowing the medicinal marijuana facilities to apply first.
right,
So they're forming a law. We have no law. We have medicinal marijuana that are allowed to apply. And nobody else in the world is. Not what the state's doing. The
no,
state
that is what they're doing right now. That is, only medical marijuana facilities are in the first round.
So I know that the laws aren't laws yet. But I find it incredibly difficult to believe that the state is gonna come out with laws and say only medicinal marijuana facilities that exist today will be allowed to function as a adult use distributor in the future.
They're not saying in the future. They're saying right now, only the medical marijuana dispensaries will be getting adult use licenses.
Okay, so
yes,
if I may? So we're saying right now that only medicinal, are the ones that are gonna be able to get the license. We don't know the timeline yet for anybody who's not a medicinal dispensary to apply for an adult use dispensary.
Mhm.
Why on earth would we consider a limitation, legislation prescribing who can apply in Newark forever when we don't know when those licenses are gonna be, and we're gonna pass it as an emergency? To me, if we're gonna put together a limitation, we can certainly do so. If what we're hearing is the state is gonna do the medicinal first, we can actually wait and see, do we get all 3 of them? Is only one of them? And then we can look at, okay, what makes sense for Newark based on what we experienced with the medicinal. So in my view, I don't see why we need to do this now when we're making it very clear that only the medicinal can apply anyway.
Right, but they can also get another license for another location, is what it's appearing through the 10B.
Right now,
That will be the next one.
but not right now.
Well, I'm not sure of their time. I'm not sure.
Right,
when
but not right now. The
But
only ones we've heard of
the
that are gonna go
10B
forward are
are
in
for
this,
current medical marijuana dispensaries.
at their
And
current.
if they're not located with a cultivator or a processor, they can also apply for an extra license at a location as long as there's no limitations or prohibitions.
When?
I don't know that. I don't know.
Right, so it's not fine. That's that's my whole
I
point.
mean, I think it's final that they're going to do this. When, I don't know.
Isn't it part of the final regs though? When they'll spell that out?
That's spelled out in the regulations that are current. The timelines, I don't know. I don't know.
On this, one of the components that we're not addressing is the very nature of what's happening here is we have recreational marijuana and medicinal marijuana. Medicinal marijuana has a sense of stability to it. It's scripted for the largest part. And so therefore, it has a purpose. Recreational marijuana is just that. They want to recreate something. We're not talking about a bank or a car dealership or insurance company or cable company that's being regulated. These things are behavior altering. They're going to alter cognitive choices, and as well as they're addictive in nature. And so we just went through skill games where in and of itself was okay, but what it attracted was not. And therefore, we ended up with extra police calls. We ended up with some places getting 40-something calls against them. And so we have to consider this. That's my point is in limiting this, especially to where they are. Because they're in shopping malls, they're in places that are very public, they're not hidden. And so when these behaviors happen, they will. It's going to be something that with 3, we'll have the opportunity to work through this new ground. A little more depth.
Thank you, Bill. I feel like I've jumped back to prohibition, and that's kind of what's happening here. I am an entrepreneur and someone who believes in free enterprise. Our city and individuals, Mr. Hauser and our law director, are putting a limitation to the 3 medical marijuana facilities that right now are ineligible within our current regulations to even have a license in our cities. Therefore, they're trying to prohibit it in the city of Newark, in my opinion, because they cannot do it right now within the city of Newark with our current laws and legislation. Okay, that's first and foremost. The sky was falling when the medical marijuana facilities were being announced as well. And all the EORs were in, and they were all saying that this is going to create chaos within the city of Newark. And it didn't happen. If you think that the medical marijuana is just that it's controlled and it's limited because it's scripted, all it takes is money to get that. And anybody who's willing to spend $200 can get their medical marijuana card, just that they have back pain or something. And there are doctors that are out there that are just making loads of money on it, and it's no different than recreation. All they're doing, the state of Ohio did, is made it legal for their recreation. Because trust me, in the fact that there were numerous people using the medical as recreation, not actually as medical. Back to the free enterprise. I remember on this council when we tried to ban and limit billboards within the city of Newark. It didn't pass. Luckily, we had a lot of conservatives that were that understood that businesses and making sure that monopolies were not in here because they were gonna grandfather the ones that were existing. Well, then that all of a sudden they had a monopoly, those folks that were currently had the billboards in our community. So that did not pass because folks understood you don't want a monopoly within our community. You want to make sure that there's competitive situations in any business. The limitations should be just like we do with billboards, with other facilities, you know, as far as making sure things aren't near children, schools, churches. That's understanding. And we do that through our zoning. Just because the state of Ohio says it's right to say that you can limit the number of businesses within your community does not mean that it's constitutionally right and fundamentally right and conservatively right that we do that we limit any business. Anytime that government gets more involved and puts more limitations, more structure on businesses, it hurts the economy. And it can be a snowball effect. I believe in making sure that we monitor, that we have the licenses. The licenses are primarily, I saw them through this whole education process. These current facilities have changed ownership, I don't know how many times. Just making sure that they get the license in order so we have contact information if something were to go wrong. The thing is we've never had to do that yet. Do I want them on every street corner? No. The voters of Newark said that they want adult use marijuana within the city of Newark. They said that they wanted it in the state. The Licking County did, you know, the state of Ohio passed it. It is here. Just because individuals don't like marijuana, there's individuals who don't like alcohol. They don't want to have alcohol in the gas stations, in the grocery stores. There are states that do not allow that. Ohio does. There are many states that you cannot even sell beer in a grocery store. Doesn't happen in Ohio. I don't want to limit what we do with businesses. Do I want it on every street corner? No. That's what we do with zoning. If we need to expand our zoning to make sure that it doesn't happen, not only that, no one says that the 2 medical marijuana that's within a mile, that they're going to be grandfathered in. Because guess what? The adult use could be denied on one of those because they are within a mile. Then it's going to be chosen which one of those two gets it. Zoning is where we limit, where we want them. We do that through zoning, not stating that only 3 that are currently in existence can go ahead and have the adult use license, of which they're not eligible for with our current legislation that's in place. It's a tactic. Not only that, these are 2 different issues. The licensing and the limitation are 2 different issues. They're combined tactfully, politically, in order to try to get a vote in support. That happens at the state level and at the federal level, not here in Newark, Ohio. It's never happened. Not in my 20 years. We don't use tactics like that. That is politics. We don't have politics in the city of Newark like that. It's a political ploy, and I'm offended by it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things. Well, first off, I'm going to address the last comment that was made. It's actually called voting your conscience, is actually what that is. And proving is a licensing limit that does not have those limitations would not be in line with my conscience. And that's why I'm up here, and that's the way I'll vote. It's not a political motivation to make that insinuation. Is interesting to say the least. We're all here voting our conscience. I'm going to assume those motives of all my colleagues. I'm going to assume we're doing this for political gain. Can't imagine what that gain would be. There are a lot of comparisons made to billboards, banks, State Farm. This is still a federally illegal substance. So let's just make that comment real quick. This is not a billboard. So I think it's important that we take that into account. There's also a comment made that the voters said they wanted it within Newark. I'm not sure that's actually true. The voters said they wanted it in the state of Ohio. They didn't specifically say they wanted 3 locations or any specific number of locations, so I think that's also not necessarily a correct statement. I think that I'm not of the opinion that regardless, one way or another on this issue, that it's gonna cause chaos. Not that extreme on this issue. I just think this is not just, I think things will be different as we transition from medical to recreational. And as a city, we don't want to just let the state decide what our community is going to be. We want to control that message to decide what we want our community to be. And I think that's what this does in a prudent and careful way. So I will make a motion to move forward on this legislation.
Motion by Hauser. Second by Lyon.
Mr. Chair,
Right.
I would like to make a motion to separate out 8507, section C, I believe, is that section that I'm talking about?
I'm not sure what the.
The limitation,
Section where it limits the
850.02 B,
85002B.
B is in boy.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to separate out 850.02, section B. For those on council who have not been through this before, don't understand what I just did. Asking is that this goes through as 2 different pieces of legislation, one on the licensing. And then a separate question on that section that limits the number of facilities and who gets to apply. I'm not asking to vote it up and down as a whole. I'm asking to have 2 votes, 2 different issues, 2 totally different issues.
Mr. Chair. Given that we've spent almost the entire time here talking about the limitation, there's a number of issues within the licensing we haven't even addressed. There's criminal penalties, there's a process for appeals that I think really do need to be addressed. And clearly the dispensary issue itself, the limitation is a much more controversial issue. I think we should consider it separately. So I'm going to second Mr. Rath's motion.
Mr. Chair, I guess the point of order here, is it possible to comment on that, or is it discussing the issue for us? Procedure manager.
Not either. Not gonna catch it.
It's debatable.
I'll just make a brief, I'll every, and I think that, I know that it was insinuated that it's a political motivation that we're to keep these together. I would be comfortable with a licensing procedure moving forward that didn't contain this specific. I don't view them as 2 separate issues. View them as intimately connected as we move forward with this process. So I would be in support of that.
Sure.
Thank you. I think the reason for needing to consider them separately is that if for some reason, if we don't pass any licensing, and we pass the zoning, the safety director has no access, no information from the adult use facilities that we have. So I think getting the licensing through, regardless of whether you think a limit is a good idea or a bad idea, the licensing itself includes another limitation because it again allows the safety director to appeal to council to say, hey, okay, we have too many of these, or hey, any number of reasons that he might have a concern about a particular applicant, he can come to council and appeal to it. So I think there's a separate mechanism for that, that I would be happy to move forward, whether we have a limit or not. I think it's important that we move forward the licensing, separately. So that's why I'm supportive of, motion separate.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. My political motivation is that when folks tie things together, in order to get a vote in a manner, there are folks who wholeheartedly will vote for the licensing, want the licensing, but yet they don't want to vote in their conscience on the limitation. So therefore, you're putting someone in a position to vote no on licensing just because of the one part of it that is being tied in there as far as the limitation. The separation would allow an individual to vote no on one and yes on the other. Because I don't think that anybody's opposed to the licensing that I've heard that does not believe that we should have licensing just like we do recreational. So tying those together forces someone to vote on whether or not you want a license. And, you know, I believe that everybody wants a license. We've done this with other pieces of legislation. Historically, when someone is opposed to a part of it, that it is separated out. It's always been a professional courtesy of those on council in order to separate that. So then it is not used to try to get someone to vote yes, just because the bigger portion is to make sure that we have the licensing. The limitation is maybe somewhere somebody wants to make a stance.
I'm gonna be really honest with you. I've heard conscience, politics, I've heard federal, I've heard banks and insurance companies, and I'll tell you what concerns me the most. What I keep hearing is, we don't know yet, we haven't heard yet, the state hasn't said anything yet. That something hasn't been decided yet, we're gonna wait until September 7th to hear something. I feel like there's a lot more questions than there are answers. And I think that's what concerns me more than anything else. I just don't think we're ready to,
Actually, that's it. Don't mind.
sure, why not?
Like I said, when I started, when we passed the legislation for licensing for medicinal marijuana, the purpose of that licensure was for any facilities who are moving into the city of Newark would communicate with us, would give us information about who the owner was, who the contacts were, what their business was that they were doing, and then also access those facilities to our safety forces. That was it. That is licensure of medicinal marijuana in Newark. Hopefully that's what it should be for recreational use as well. The state is going to a multitude of regulations, hoops to jump through, if you will, to be able to do what they want to do. We're going to comply with each and every single one of those without a doubt. But we just want the extra added layer of saying, you can't move into Newark without letting us know, without giving us full access. So regardless of what the state's hoops are, this is just us protecting our city. And again, as far as the limits go, there's plenty of ways to limit this. We have no zoning laws yet, although we have something in the works that can be changed, that can be amended at any time. And then ultimately, in some pieces of legislation, we have the ability of the safety director to simply say no. And at that point, it comes back to the full council and the 10 of us at the unit decide yes or no. So there are plenty of safety nets in there for us to limit where this is, to ensure that it's not going where we don't want it.
Okay, we'll give you all one more shot, wrap this up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we separate the question, Mr. Hauser can certainly vote no on the licensing and no on the, and yes on his limitation. If we don't separate the question, as Mr. Marmy said, it does put me in a quandary, because I do think we need the licensing, but the limitation is written, doesn't work. So I really do think we need to consider these separately, given that there is a lot of detail in this licensing thing. I think we still need to discuss.
Anyone else in the audience? Okay, thank you. If I understand this right, we need to vote on whether or not we're gonna separate the two parts of this. All those in favor of separating this, can I do this as a group or that's down or what?
You can do it yay or nay.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
As we always.
I think I'm good up to 5.
He can do a roll call vote though, can't he?
You can,
You want?
sure, probably easier.
Mr. Hauser?
Celebration. No.
Okay? Ms. Blind,
No,
Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Yes.
and my vote is no. Okay, now let's go to, we're gonna go back to the original piece of legislation now, is that correct? Okay. All right, let's run that program again.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to table, given that we don't know what the regulations are. This is way premature. We still have emergency clauses in here. This is unlimited, time, it goes on indefinitely. I think we need to reconsider this. So I'll make a motion to table indefinitely, but I think we should bring it back to the table when we've got final regs and we have a better idea of what the medical dispensaries are gonna do.
I need a second for that, is that correct?
Second.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, that's it for safety committee.
No?
Yeah.
Call the vote on that.
yes,
Voting on table, okay? I'm sorry, I've gotten lost in the layers of this. Mr. Haugen?
No.
Ms. Blind?
no,
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm going to vote yes on that. I say we table this. There are too many unanswered questions. Thank you.
Personnel.
Personnel, isn't it? We have time.
One time.
We have time?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can't wait to see the minute for that.
Good luck, Amy.
Yeah. All right.
It is.
Mr. Chu,
But you can't.
new personnel.
Okay.
Yep, just remind me. Somebody want to sit in for Mark? Jeff, do you want to sit in for Mark?
Sure.
Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna call this personnel committee to order. Those present are myself, Lang, Shu, Ryan, Cosmo, and Rath in for Labutus. Just one item on the agenda, we have ordinance, 2419.
Yeah.
An ordinance amending chapter 210 of the codified ordinances of the city of Newark to establish procedures for setting the compensation of elected officials. I actually brought this amendment forward, so I'll speak to it. It's pretty simple. So as many would recall, we've got keep talking about licensing. No, we have legislation in place that currently requires any changes for elected officials to be made before petitions are due for those campaigns, for those terms. And it was brought to my attention that there may be some ambiguity in our current law because it just says when petitions are due. And there's multiple deadlines for when petitions are due. As we all know, there's the partisan deadlines, usually around February. And then there's a deadline for petitions for an independent, which are later in August. I think the intent was always to ensure we had the salary set before campaigns begin, which I think would be the first deadline, the partisan deadline in February. And so you'll see there's a deletion of considered, because we don't need to say considered and enacted, we just need to say enacted by council. And then there's the addition of partisan, where we say the deadline, the council has to enact the change prior to the partisan deadline. So those are the two minor changes in this that I think will clarify and avoid any confusion going forward. So with that, I will make a motion. Second to the council. Thank you, Mr. Cost. It's a motion by Lang, second by Cost. Any questions or discussion from the committee, from the audience?
Just want legal clarification from our law director indicating there's the three positions of council president, council at large, and the ward seats. We had legislation in place that indicates that those salaries are going to be considered just based upon what the minimum OPERS is. And just want to make sure that this language in this legislation does not supersede that.
Law director, I can call your attention to the end of section 210 A, the last line where you say, if we don't make any changes, the compensation package for such position shall remain unchanged from the then existing structure for the forthcoming term. So if we have a structure in place, that would continue.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, with that, we will vote to send this on to full council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That passes 5. And council will commence at 7. That ends our committee. Thank you.
Water.